What happens when two of Hollywood's most beloved personalities sit down for what should be a lighthearted chat, only for the conversation to spiral into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history? The tension that erupted between Jason Momoa and Kelly Clarkson wasn't just unexpected, it was completely out of character for both stars. And what started as innocent banter quickly became something neither of them could control. Before we get into exactly what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which celebrity interview moment shocked you the most. The Kelly Clarkson Show has always prided itself on being a safe space for celebrities. Kelly's warm, genuine energy usually puts even the most guarded guests at ease. So when Jason Momoa walked onto the stage, the audience was ready for laughs, stories about his latest projects, and maybe some behind-the-scenes tales from his life. The applause was thunderous as he made his entrance, flashing that signature smile and giving Kelly a friendly hug before settling into the guest chair. Kelly started things off the way she always does, with enthusiasm and genuine curiosity. "Jason, it is so good to have you here. I've been a huge fan for years, and I have to say, you always bring such incredible energy to everything you do." Jason nodded, clearly comfortable. "Thanks, Kelly, I appreciate that. It's great to be here. So let's dive right in," Kelly continued, leaning forward with interest. "You've had such an amazing career trajectory, from television to becoming one of the biggest action stars on the planet. What do you think it is about your approach that resonates with so many people?" Jason paused for a moment, considering the question. "You know, I think it's about authenticity. I've never tried to be something I'm not. Whether I'm playing a superhero or just being myself, I keep it real. People can sense when you're putting on a show versus when you're genuinely being yourself." Kelly smiled, nodding along. "That's beautiful. And speaking of authenticity, you've been really vocal about environmental causes, indigenous rights, and protecting our oceans. Those are issues that clearly matter deeply to you." "Absolutely," Jason replied, his tone becoming more serious. "The ocean has been my life since I was a kid. Growing up in Hawaii, you develop this connection to the land and the water. It's not just about conservation, it's about respecting what gives us life. And indigenous communities have known this forever. We need to listen to them." Kelly's expression shifted slightly, and there was a brief moment where something flickered across her face. "That's really admirable. And I think it's important for people with platforms like yours to speak up. But I'm curious, and I hope you don't mind me asking this, because I think it's something a lot of people wonder about. How do you balance being an environmental activist while also working in an industry that, let's be honest, has a pretty massive carbon footprint?" The audience went quiet. It was a fair question, but the way Kelly asked it carried an edge that hadn't been there moments before. Jason's smile faded slightly, though he maintained his composure. "That's a good question," he said carefully, "and it's something I think about constantly. The film industry does have environmental impacts, no question, but I try to do what I can within that space. I've pushed for sustainable practices on sets, I've worked with production companies to reduce waste, and I use my platform to raise awareness. Is it perfect? No, but doing something is better than doing nothing." Kelly nodded, but there was something pointed in her follow-up. "Sure. But isn't there something a bit contradictory about flying around the world on private jets to promote movies while telling regular people to reduce their carbon footprints? I mean, one transatlantic flight probably negates the impact of someone recycling for a year." Jason's jaw tightened slightly. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted. This wasn't the playful banter the audience had signed up for. "I don't use private jets regularly," Jason said, his voice still controlled but noticeably cooler. "And when I do travel for work, it's part of my job. But I offset those emissions. I support renewable energy projects, and I'm constantly trying to improve. Nobody's perfect, Kelly. I'm not claiming to be, but I'm trying." Of course," Kelly said quickly, though she didn't quite back down. "I'm not attacking you, I promise. I'm just playing devil's advocate here because I think these are conversations we need to have. Celebrities often tell people what to do, but there's this disconnect between the message and the lifestyle. You know." Jason leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, there was visible frustration in his eyes. "I hear what you're saying, but I think you're oversimplifying it. I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm sharing what I care about and what I'm learning. If that inspires someone to make changes, great. If not, that's their choice. But suggesting that I shouldn't speak up about things that matter just because I work in Hollywood, that doesn't sit right with me." The audience was completely silent now. This had gone from a standard interview to something uncomfortable, something real. Kelly shifted in her seat, and there was a flicker of something in her expression. Maybe regret, maybe defensiveness. "I'm not saying you shouldn't speak up," Kelly clarified, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely backing down either. "I'm just saying that there's a responsibility that comes with having influence. And sometimes I wonder if celebrities fully understand the impact of their words when their actions don't always align." Jason's eyes narrowed. "My actions do align, Kelly. Maybe not perfectly, but I'm doing the work. And honestly, I find it interesting that you're questioning my commitment when I've spent years putting my money, my time, and my energy into these causes. What exactly are you trying to get at here? Kelly blinked, clearly taken aback by the directness of his response. I'm not trying to get at anything, Jason. I'm just asking questions. Isn't that what interviews are for? Sure, Jason replied, his voice edged with frustration. But there's a difference between asking questions and making accusations. You're implying that I'm a hypocrite, and I don't appreciate that. The tension was now palpable. Kelly's producer could be seen off camera, looking concerned. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, stay silent, or leave. This had gone off the rails, and everyone knew it. Kelly took a breath, attempting to reset. Jason, I'm sorry if it came across that way. That genuinely wasn't my intention. I have so much respect for you and the work you do. I think maybe I phrased things poorly. Jason didn't respond immediately. He looked at her, studying her face, trying to determine if the apology was genuine or just damage control. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. Okay, he said quietly, I appreciate that, but the damage was done. The easy rapport they'd had at the beginning was gone, replaced by a fragile truce that neither of them seemed confident would hold. Kelly glanced down at her notes, clearly trying to find a way to salvage the interview. Let's talk about your upcoming projects, she said, forcing brightness back into her voice. You've got some really exciting things coming up. Jason nodded, but his body language had completely changed. He was no longer leaning forward, engaged and open. Now he sat back, arms crossed, slightly guarded. Yeah, I've got a few things in the works. Can you tell us about them? Kelly prompted, smiling in a way that looked almost desperate. There's a new film I'm working on, Jason said, his responses now clipped and minimal. It's an action thriller, should be out next year. Kelly waited for more, but Jason didn't elaborate. The silence stretched out, awkward and heavy. Kelly laughed nervously. Well, that sounds amazing. I'm sure your fans are really excited about it. I hope so, Jason replied flatly. Another painful silence. Kelly was clearly scrambling now, flipping through her notes, searching for something, anything, to get the interview back on track. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was supposed to be fun, light, entertaining. Instead, it felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. So, Kelly tried again, her voice a bit too bright, a bit too forced. You're also known for being an incredible father. How do you balance your career with family life? Jason's expression hardened. I'd rather not talk about my family, if that's okay. Kelly's face flushed. Of course, absolutely, I totally understand. But the atmosphere had grown even more strained. Whatever goodwill had existed between them was evaporating rapidly, and both of them knew it. Kelly cleared her throat, visibly trying to regroup. She glanced at her producer again, who gave her a subtle gesture to keep going. The show had to continue, even if it felt like walking through a minefield. Okay, let's shift gears a bit, Kelly said, attempting a more casual tone. I want to talk about something I think is really interesting. You've become this symbol of masculinity in Hollywood, but you've also been open about vulnerability, about mental health, about breaking down those traditional tough guy stereotypes. How important is that to you? Jason's posture relaxed slightly. This seemed like safer territory. It's incredibly important. I think we've done a lot of damage by telling men they can't feel things, that they have to be stoic and hard all the time. That's not healthy. I want my kids, I want the next generation, to know that being strong means being honest about your emotions, not hiding them. That's really powerful, Kelly said, and for a moment, it seemed like they might find their way back to solid ground. And I think that message resonates with a lot of people. But here's what I find interesting, and again, I'm just thinking out loud here. You talk about vulnerability and breaking stereotypes, but a lot of your roles are these hyper-masculine, warrior-type characters. Isn't there a bit of a disconnect there too? Jason's eyes widened slightly, and the frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface started to bubble up again. Are you serious right now? Kelly looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? I mean, you keep looking for contradictions that aren't there, Jason said, his voice rising slightly. Playing a warrior doesn't mean I can't also advocate for emotional openness. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be physically strong and emotionally vulnerable at the same time. That's literally the point I'm trying to make. I understand that, Kelly said, though her tone was defensive now. I'm just pointing out that the roles you choose to play often reinforce the same stereotypes you're claiming to want to break down. Jason leaned forward, his frustration now fully visible. I choose roles that I connect with, roles that challenge me as an actor. Just because a character is a fighter doesn't mean he can't have depth, doesn't mean he can't show emotion. Have you actually watched the things I've been in, or are you just making assumptions based on posters? The audience gasped. This was no longer just uncomfortable. It was hostile. Kelly's face flushed red, and for a moment, she looked genuinely hurt. Of course, I've watched your work, she said, her voice tight. I wouldn't have you on my show if I didn't respect what you do. It doesn't feel like respect, Jason shot back. It feels like you've had some agenda from the moment I sat down. Every question has been a gotcha. Every conversation has been you trying to catch me in some kind of contradiction. What's this really about, Kelly? Kelly's mouth opened and closed. She looked to her producer again, but this time there was no helpful gesture. No way out. She was on her own. I don't have an agenda, she said, but her voice wavered. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation. Honest? Jason repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. This doesn't feel honest. It feels like an interrogation. You're not listening to my answers. You're just waiting for your next chance to take a shot. The studio was dead silent. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this unraveling. Kelly took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, there was an edge to her voice that hadn't been there before. You know what, Jason? Maybe I am pushing back a little. And maybe that's because I'm tired of celebrities coming on shows like this, saying all the right things, presenting this perfect image, and then going back to their lives where they don't actually have to deal with the consequences of their words. Jason stared at her, genuinely taken aback. Excuse me, you heard me, Kelly continued, and now she was the one leaning forward, her frustration matching his. You talk about the environment, you talk about indigenous rights, you talk about breaking down stereotypes, and that's all great. But at the end of the day, you go home to your mansion. You get paid millions of dollars to pretend to be someone else, and the rest of us are left trying to figure out how to actually make a difference in the real world. Jason's jaw dropped. Are you kidding me right now? You're worth tens of millions of dollars. Kelly, you have a massive platform. Don't sit there and pretend like you're just some regular person struggling to get by. I never said I was, Kelly fired back, but I'm also not the one going around acting like I'm some kind of activist while living a completely contradictory lifestyle. And there it is, Jason said, standing up abruptly. The microphone clipped to his shirt crackled with the sudden movement. That's what this has been about the whole time. You've already decided who I am, what I represent. You don't actually care about my answers. You just wanted to tear me down on national television. Kelly stood up too, her face flushed with anger and adrenaline. That's not fair, and you know it. What's not fair, Jason said, his voice loud enough that it echoed through the studio, is inviting someone onto your show under the pretense of a friendly conversation and then blindsiding them with personal attacks disguised as questions. They weren't attacks, Kelly insisted. Though her voice shook slightly, they were legitimate questions that your fans deserve answers to. My fans, Jason laughed again, but there was no humor in it. My fans know me. They know my work. They don't need you to interrogate me on their behalf. This is about you, Kelly. This is about whatever issue you clearly have with me or with people like me. Kelly's eyes flashed. People like you. What's that supposed to mean? I don't know, Jason said, throwing his hands up. You tell me. You're the one who's been hostile since the moment I sat down. What is it? Do you have a problem with actors? With activists? With men? What's your deal? My deal? Kelly's voice rose to match his. My deal is that I'm sick of the phoniness. Jason, I'm sick of the carefully crafted images and the PR-approved answers and the celebrities who think they can say whatever they want without being challenged. Challenged is one thing, Jason countered. Attacked is another, and you crossed that line about 10 minutes ago. The producer was now visible on camera, making cutting motions with his hand, trying to get them to stop, to go to commercial, to do anything other than continue this public meltdown. But neither Kelly nor Jason seemed to notice or care. If you feel attacked, maybe that's because you know there's truth to what I'm saying, Kelly said, her voice cold now. Maybe you're defensive because deep down, you know that your activism is more about image than impact. Jason's face went pale, then red. For a long moment, he just stared at her, and the entire studio held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. You don't know anything about me, he said quietly, but the words carried more weight than if he'd shouted them. You don't know what I do when the cameras aren't rolling. You don't know how much time, money, and energy I put into the causes I care about. You don't know the sacrifices I make or the work I do. You just see the surface and make judgments based on your own cynicism and bitterness. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me, Kelly snapped. You don't know me either. You're right, I don't. Jason agreed, but I thought I did. I thought you were genuine, kind, someone who built her career on lifting people up. Clearly, I was wrong. Kelly flinched as if she'd been slapped. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Jason said, reaching up to unclip his microphone. This whole interview has been a setup from the start, and I'm done playing along. What are you doing? Kelly asked, watching as he removed the mic pack from his belt. I'm leaving, Jason said simply, placing the microphone on the chair. I came here in good faith, and you ambushed me. I don't have to sit here and take this. Kelly's producer was now rushing onto the stage, trying to intervene, but Jason held up a hand. Don't. We're done here. Jason, wait, Kelly said, and there was something in her voice now that hadn't been there before. Something that sounded almost like panic. Can we just take a breath and reset? Jason paused, looking at her with an expression that was hard to read. There was anger there, yes, but also disappointment and something else, maybe sadness. Reset, Jason repeated, and there was disbelief in his voice. Kelly, you can't just reset from this. You can't say the things you said and then act like we can just start over with a smile and a laugh. The producer stepped between them, his hands raised in a calming gesture. Folks, let's just take 5 minutes. We can go to commercial, everyone can cool down, and we can figure this out. There's nothing to figure out, Jason said firmly, though he wasn't yelling anymore. His voice had dropped to something calmer, but somehow more final. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not going to sit back down and pretend this didn't happen. That's the kind of phoniness Kelly was just complaining about, right? Kelly's face crumpled slightly. She looked around at her crew, at the audience that sat frozen in their seats, at the cameras still recording every moment of this disaster. Jason, please. I didn't mean for it to go this way. Then how did you mean for it to go? Jason asked. And the question wasn't angry anymore. It was genuine. Because from where I'm standing, this went exactly how you planned. You had your questions ready, your talking points loaded. This wasn't some spontaneous thing. You came in with a goal. Kelly opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the floor, and when she looked back up, there were tears in her eyes. You're right, she said quietly. You're right, and I'm sorry. The admission seemed to catch Jason off guard. He'd been halfway to the exit, but he stopped, turning back to look at her. I did have questions prepared, Kelly continued, her voice shaking now. And I did push harder than I should have, but it wasn't about you specifically, Jason. It was about my own frustration with this whole machine, this whole industry that we're both part of, and I took that out on you, and that wasn't fair. Jason studied her face, trying to determine if this was genuine or just another performance. The audience was completely silent, and even the crew had stopped moving. Everyone was watching this moment unfold. Why? Jason asked simply. Why me? Why today? Kelly wiped at her eyes, smudging her makeup. Because you're easy to project onto, I guess. You're successful, you're beloved, you seem to have it all figured out, and I've been feeling really lost lately, really frustrated with the superficiality of all this. And instead of dealing with that in a healthy way, I decided to make it your problem. That was wrong. Jason was quiet for a long moment. The producer looked like he wanted to say something, but wisely stayed silent. This was between the two of them now. I appreciate you saying that, Jason finally said, and I'm sorry to. I came in hot with some of my responses. You hit a nerve because these are things I actually do struggle with. The balance, the contradictions, the question of whether any of this matters. I think about that stuff constantly. So when you brought it up, it felt like you were confirming my worst fears about myself. Kelly nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I didn't know. I should have been more thoughtful. We both should have been, Jason said, and there was a sadness in his voice now. But I don't think we can come back from this, at least not today. This interview is done. Kelly, I need to leave. I understand, Kelly said softly, and I really am sorry. Jason nodded once, then looked out at the audience. They were all staring at him with wide eyes, phones undoubtedly recording, ready to blast this all over social media within minutes. He took a breath. I'm sorry you all had to witness that, he said to the crowd. That wasn't what anyone signed up for today, but I hope maybe there's something valuable in seeing that even people who seem to have it together are just human beings trying to figure it out. We mess up, we say things we don't mean, we hurt each other, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. A few people in the audience nodded. Some were crying. The whole room felt heavy with emotion. Jason turned back to Kelly one last time. I hope you figure out whatever you're going through. I really do, but I can't be part of it anymore. I know, Kelly whispered. Thank you for being honest with me, even when it was hard. Jason gave her a small, sad smile, then turned and walked off the stage. The cameras followed him as he made his way past the crew, past the producer who didn't try to stop him, and out through the stage door. The heavy door closed behind him with a definitive thud that seemed to echo through the entire studio. Kelly stood there alone on the stage, tears running freely now. She looked at the audience, at her crew, at the cameras still rolling. The producer finally approached her, putting a gentle hand on her shoulder. We need to go to commercial, he said quietly. Kelly nodded numbly. She looked directly into the main camera, and when she spoke, her voice was raw and broken. We're going to take a break. I don't know what happens after this, but we'll be right back. The commercial break signal flashed, but the damage was done. The audience sat in shocked silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Crew members whispered to each other, already knowing this would be the biggest story in entertainment news within the hour. Kelly walked off the stage without another word, leaving her team to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. But everyone knew there was no salvaging this. The interview that was supposed to be a fun, lighthearted conversation had turned into something else entirely. A raw, painful display of human frailty and conflict that no one would forget anytime soon. In the hallway outside the studio, Jason paused for a moment, leaning against the wall and taking deep breaths. His security team approached, looking concerned, but he waved them off. He just needed a minute to process everything that had happened. He thought about Kelly's apology, about her admission that she was struggling. He understood that better than she probably realized. But understanding didn't erase what had happened. The words had been said, The damage had been done, and there was no taking any of it back. Jason pulled out his phone and saw that it was already blowing up with messages from his team, his friends, people who had somehow already heard about what went down. He turned the phone off and slipped it back into his pocket. He'd deal with all of that later. Right now, he just needed to get out of there. As he made his way to the exit, he passed by monitors showing other parts of the studio. On one screen, he could see Kelly back in her dressing room, sitting with her head in her hands. Part of him wanted to go back, to try one more time to talk it through. But he knew that wouldn't help. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away and let people deal with their own stuff. He pushed through the final door and stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight. His car was waiting, and he climbed in without looking back. As the vehicle pulled away from the studio, Jason felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also relief. And underneath it all, a deep exhaustion. The interview would go viral. Of course, people would take sides, create narratives, make it into something bigger than it was. But Jason knew the truth of what had happened in that room. Two people, both struggling with their own issues, had collided in a moment of raw honesty that neither of them had been prepared for. And sometimes, that's just how it goes. So what do you think? Was Jason right to walk off, or should he have stayed and tried to work through it? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because we've got plenty more stories like this coming your way. This is the kind of unfiltered, real moment that reminds us that even celebrities are just people navigating complicated emotions and difficult conversations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.